Another type of grid system, besides a column-based grid, is a modular grid system. In a modular grid system, in addition to the vertical divisions of space, there is a horizontal division of space. Let's look at some examples of modular grids and see how they work. The MC website is built on a modular grid. Modular grids work particularly well to organize the content for web pages. In the website for Yellowstone Park, you see how modules are all equal and all equally spaced, connected modules for text and images. This is a fun food website called mouth.com, and it's built on equal modules. There are many different products, all different shapes and sizes, so organizing them in a grid makes it manageable for the viewer to take it in without feeling overwhelmed. The column at the left has links to articles about vendors and social media. It all feels very organized. Here's a great poster infographic designed by one of my students, showing the steps on how he built his own personal PC. It's a grid of 4 units across and 4 units down, and the computer in the center occupies 4 modules. Modules can be very useful in organizing infographics. This page looks exciting yet organized because it makes playful use of the modules, combining them both vertically and horizontally. These bite-sized pieces invite the reader into content because they offer a quick and easy hit of information in each modular component. A modular grid provides a structure for the steps in this yoga instructional chart. There's a set of modules for the icons and the descriptions of the poses. Each module within each set has identical horizontal and vertical dimensions, even though the number of words in each of the modules is different. They've been sized to accommodate the longest and the shortest descriptions with a comfortable margin of space. One last example. Here's a fine use of modules combining images and text from the documentary app Spies of Mississippi. There are 4 equal vertical modules and 4 horizontal modules. The text boxes are all the same proportion. Think about whether a grid composed of modules can work well to organize and give structure and rhythm to your project. As always, your content should be the starting point when you're considering how to use a grid that best works for you. Creating a modular grid can be difficult and tricky depending on the software you're working on. So let me show you how to create a modular grid in InDesign, Photoshop, and Illustrator so that you can set it up depending on the project that you want to work on. First off, in InDesign, you can always easily create a column grid when you set up your document. But to create a modular grid of rows and columns, after you've created your document, go up to Layout and down to Create Guides. This will give you a set of guidelines that you can create rows and columns within. Now these guides can be arranged to your margins or your page. In either way, make sure you got your preview turned on. When you increase the number of rows, you can see it's starting to create rows of guidelines in between here, and we can also adjust our gutter in between them. If we want to create columns, simply increase the number of columns, and you can see now I've got a column type grid that I can work with in that type of structure. At any time, you can always change up your rows and columns in your module by going back to the Create Guides, but just know that you may want to remove the existing guides before you create a new column and row structure. Otherwise, it's going to create new guides on top of it. Going into Photoshop, it's very similar. We can go up to View and down to New Guide Layout. This will open up a custom guide of rows and columns that we can create. So you can type in or increase the number of rows that you want. You can adjust the gutter between each of those rows. Let's make it a little bit smaller. And you can turn on the row structure as well. As you increase the number, you can see it's all placed in here. In addition to this, you can also create columns from the central point outwards rather than the edge of your page. Sometimes this comes in handy, especially if you have a margin structure that you want to keep. Also, as within InDesign, you may need to clear your existing guides if you ever need to create new guides within Photoshop. The advantage of Photoshop is that you can also pre-save or load up some predefined columns and grid structures. For instance, if you want to automatically create 12 columns, this will give you a 12-column grid. You can then type in the number of rows that you want from here. We'll say OK to this. In InDesign, it may be a little bit trickier. Jumping into InDesign, we've got our blank document. There's two different ways we can create a modular grid. Probably the fastest way is to choose the rectangular grid tool, usually hiding underneath your line segment tool. With this tool, you can click and drag, and you can see it'll automatically start to create a grid of rows and columns. While you're holding down your mouse, you can hit the arrow keys to increase or decrease the number of columns, or the up and down arrows to increase or decrease the number of rows. When you let go of it, you can see it automatically locks in that particular size. Of course, at any time, you can just click once and dial in the exact number of horizontal and vertical dividers that you want from here. The other way you can create a grid structure is by using your rectangle. You can click and drag and create a series of rectangles that will be filled in. Let's fill it in this case so we can see it. Then make a copy of each rectangle, giving yourself an amount of gutter that you want. You can then duplicate it by going to Object and Transform and choose Transform again, or you can hit Command D and that will duplicate those again. Then once you've got a row established, it's a simple matter of also selecting all of them and creating a number for your columns. Again, going to Object, Transform again, and hitting Command D until you've filled out the number of rows and columns that you want. Once all of these are selected, you can then select all of them and resize them to the position and shape that you want. Then it's a simple matter of turning these into guides. With them selected, go up to View, down to Guide, and choose Make Guide. This will turn all of your rectangles into their own guided positions. Do make sure that you've got your guides locked down so that you don't accidentally move them, and you can use them however you need within your design. If you wish to connect them together, you can also open up your rulers and then click and drag on the ruler to drag off individual guidelines that can snap automatically to each edge. Sometimes these come in handy whenever you have to line up elements, but it does take a little bit of extra time to add on those vertical and horizontal guides. You can click on the top ruler and drag those down as well. So use these techniques wherever possible within the layout of your typographic designs.